all the propaganda that the Nazis had in the uprising of Hitler in the 30s and 40s. And thank God we're not that extreme, because there's enough normalcy here. And I really don't feel directly threatened yet, but I live in a 55 and older community, and we've had talks about hatred, and we've had a swastika or two defacing somebody's door.
Well, welcome to the podcast again today. It's great to have you with us. My name is Jeff, and I'll be your host. And our guest today is Robert Wolf. Robert is the son of Holocaust survivors and the author of Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. Published by Amsterdam Publishers, this 4-time award-winning book is based on Robert's family history, first living under the Nazis and then under the communist regime in Hungary. In 1944, almost 500,000 Jews of this era. I messed it up. I jumped a line. I'm going to start again. Well, hi, welcome to the podcast today. It's great to have you with us. My name is Jeff, and I'll be your host. And our guest today is Robert Wolf. He is the son of Holocaust survivors and author of Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. Published by Amsterdam Publishers, this 4-time award-winning book is based on Robert's family history, first living under the Nazis and then under the communist regime in Hungary. In 1944, almost 500,000 Jewish Hungarians were deported to Auschwitz. Among the few surviving Hungarian Jews of this era was Robert's father, Ervin Wolf, who was conscripted into the brutal forced labor service, cut off from the outside world in order to endure inhumane brutalities and servitude. Once freed, a new oppression then took hold as communist rule under Stalin turned friends to foes, enveloping Hungary with fear and suspicion, and testing everyone's character and strength. Robert's book is an exciting page-turner that has a lot of relevance at this particular time in history. Robert, thank you for being with us today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful, much appreciated, Jeff, and thank you, Laura, for orchestrating this and having me on.
Amazing. Well, we want to jump into the background of the book. First of all, what inspired you to write Not a Real Enemy? What was the impetus behind the book?
Well, I'll go right into the history of the book. My mom and dad, they wrote his autobiography in the 1970s as though the events had happened the previous day. They were very sharp people. They were educators. They were Holocaust educators. They're also very well-rounded people. They believed in the arts and the theater and museums, the opera, traveling, and education in general. So well-rounded people, very sharp people. So they wrote the stories as though they had happened the previous day, including the details about how the table was set, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the bitter cold, the feelings that they had during certain moments in their harrowing times. So they went from paper and pencil to a typewriter to a computer. Flash forward, I might have read the manuscript once, maybe 30 years ago. Didn't really think much of it at the time. I was busy with family and career. I'm a radiologist, so I've been a part-time radiologist the last few years, but I was full-time radiologist for at least half my career, and just busy with life in general. So I never really thought much of it. I did kind of remember his first escape. He had 4, so they were all harrowing. We can talk a little bit more about those, but 4 escapes and other miracles in between. That's just so unbelievable. And that's one of the impetus of writing the book was those miracles, was finally reading again. So what happened is my dad passed in 1997, unfortunately, and then my mom in 2016. And now the story was on a disc. And a historian friend of my mom's and mine now too in Michigan, where I was raised, handed me the disc and said, you've got to read these stories. Didn't think much of it at the time. I was real busy with mom's affairs for about another year. Then I retired for a year. And then a friend of mine in Michigan called me and said, do you want to do a little bit of part-time work doing some x-ray radiology and ultrasound from home out of Michigan? So I said, sure. And that brought me to the book. I'm actually still doing that job now, 2 days a week. But that brought me back to the disc. So now the book's on a disc. It sort of summoned me, if you will, sort of like Superman's kryptonite. I like to use that analogy. It's a little corny, but the disc summoned me. And so as a radiologist, we have 2 screens. The left screen is the patient Q, the list of the patients, and the right screen is the images that we read. And so I loaded up his autobiography between cases and read it off the left, and I dictated his biography practically word for word as much as I could, changing from first person to third person. So now that's another year. So now we're in 2019, I guess, and we didn't really get very far. We queried agents and publishers. It was kind of a dull, dry biography. It was point A to B to C. Dad did this, Dad did that. And so I sent the book to a couple of beta readers, and one of them hooked me up with Janice Harper, my co-author, who is an amazing writer, amazing book coach. She's also got a Michigan connection, anthropologist, PhD from Michigan State, which I love. She's out in Washington now. And she said, we can make this book into something really special. And she did just that. It took her a year and change. And she turned the story into converging stories, parallel stories, letters to and from home, conversations that were meaningful, very personalized the whole thing. So, and then we queried. She also gave me she helped me with my proposal package. So now we're into 2020, 21, I guess. I'm losing track of the time. This is already COVID going on, I suppose. And we pitched we queried a select number of agents and publishers. And Amsterdam Publishers was literally our shoestring catch, bottom of the ninth find. She took the project on. All she does is this genre, Holocaust and related topics. Mine is a little different because it's not just Holocaust. It covers the communists, as you've already said, and it goes back to World War I. So, we were lucky and she's been a great publisher, very supportive, no matter what happens. And the book's been out now for a little over a year. The 4 awards, I don't know what to do with that. I think it's an amazing thing. I'm not the type to really pat myself on the back. It tells me that some important readers, people in the know, appreciate the quality of the work and the importance of the work. So I guess we'll go with that. So, and it was self-motivating once I saw these stories and what my dad and mom went through, the lessons that the book elicited. It was an easy. I couldn't just let it sit in a disk or on a computer. I had to really share it with the world. So that's what I ended up doing.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for doing that, first of all. And I would say that, there's no history like personal history. When it's our story or part of our story, it does take on a whole new meaning for us. And I'm sure it's amazing for you to be able to see it come to life in the way that it has through this book. Now, Robert, you mentioned 4 escapes, 4 sort of harrowing stories. Can you just share briefly maybe 1 or 2 of the most exciting moments in the book in your mind? What would you be able to share with our listeners?
Okay. I lost a little bit of the audio. I assume you're asking about the 4 escapes, but his first one was quite harrowing. It was with his friend Frank. My dad, little side stories, my dad had a foot infection at the time, and he got to go to the hospital. He got to leave the forced labor camp. They're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the foothills, the mountains of the Carpathian Mountains. Went to a hospital to get his foot treated. The doctor, horrible conditions, unsanitary, very, very disgusting. And they treated the Jewish patients like crap. I mean, they were extremely rude to them and uncaring. And even his doctor said to me, well, it doesn't matter if I treat your foot or not, you're going to be dead soon anyway. Can you imagine that? Your doctor telling you that? So anyway, that might have saved his life, that little respite, that little escape, not escape, but that little break. So he goes back to his platoon, if you want to call it that. These were unarmed people that had to wear these stupid hats and these yellow bands, marking them as less than worthy. They were not worthy to fight for Hungary in the war. They were deemed unworthy, the Jewish people. And so he got to go back to his with his troops. And he and his best friend Frank were talking about this could be it. This could be a death march, because they didn't get a lot of information back then, but they thought that this could be a death march. And they also knew that the war was approaching the end, and they didn't know who was going to win, whether it was going to be the Nazis or the Americans, the Russians. And it's another side story. What if the Americans had taken over Hungary? We wouldn't even be here, right? So it'd be a democratic society. So needless to say, they decided they were probably on a death march. They didn't know if they were safer in Hungary or Austria. It depends. Being in the war, they just had no idea, and they decided to take off. So it was cold and wintry, and they planned that they had about a 3-day window to do it, and they just picked the right night and took off. and it was towards dark so that they could get away quite a distance before anybody would notice they were gone. And you feel that. You feel the running, you feel the cold, you feel the fright when he's hiding, hearing the soldiers come after them, and just hanging out in the woods and in the thistle, getting pricked by and bleeding from the thistle, worried about wolves and bears, that kind of thing, and the
Sure.
guards themselves. A third guy escaped with them, and they caught him. And can you imagine hiding in the thicket and listening to what these guards are doing to this guy as they dragged him back to the platoon? So, and
Yeah.
thinking you were next, and having second thoughts. So that was one escape. That was and then that's in the middle of nowhere. Second escape was unbelievable timing, unbelievable luck, in Budapest, right in front of Nazi headquarters. And it's amazing how they just came up with this last minute strategy. And this is after they were double crossed and corralled. They made it all the way back to Budapest after escaping. No light at the end of the tunnel, not knowing where you're going to go, being able to go to your hometown because they were still under fire, still at war,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
and not knowing where the next meal was, on and on. And so they finally get to Budapest, and some guy gives them a ride and corrals them back into what they call the dog pound. And so they got rearrested and end up in a collection area by Nazi headquarters in Budapest. So they escaped from there too. So amazing escape. It's just the timing and the luck and the hand of God, I like to say. And then two more under the communists. One was their final escape with my mom in '56 after the Hungarian Revolution, where they said enough is enough. They were both frontliners in the Hungarian Revolution, as my dad was an OBGYN and had to double down as a trauma surgeon. So he worked 24/7 for about 2.5 weeks. And my mom was a med student at the time, and she ran the blood bank during the war. Not a lot of people know about the Hungarian Revolution. 3,000 people died from both sides, thousands of refugees and injured people. And all they could do was work between his OBGYN duties, delivering babies and taking care of the women, and doubling down as a trauma surgeon. So after that war, they had enough, and they escaped. His third was he was a med student, and I don't want to say the details. Kind of an interesting escape, arguing with armed Russian soldiers. The risk tolerance at this point for my dad it's unbelievable. It's all about survival, all about the need for freedom. And this is when he's finally he got to go back to med school because Jews were not in med school. And the reason they had a quota that 10% of the med students could be Jewish after World War II because so many people had died, including doctors. So they had their quota, and my dad was fortunate enough to another miracle. He met a lady who knew the head of the committee at the mission office at the medical center in Budapest. I mean, talk about. And lucky too, not lucky but not, that he ran into a lady in his hometown when he finally got to go back months after Budapest was freed, his hometown of Jur was freed. And a lady comes up to him and tells him what happened to his parents at Auschwitz. They both perished at Auschwitz. And imagine that, the odds of that happening, somebody could find you and was an eyewitness as to what happened to his parents and survived to tell him about it. It's a miracle, but it's a killer. I mean, it's disheartening, but my dad was determined to go on. He didn't have any choice. I mean, he had to survive, and
Sure.
he wanted to do his parents proud, as I'm trying to do now with this book and the legacy to my family. So here's a teaser. He missed an escape. He went to the wrong train station, and everybody. This was under communist Hungary. This was before his third escape, if I'm getting the order right. And everybody he went to the wrong train station. Everybody who went to the correct train station got arrested by the communists, including his medical school classmate. So I say the luck on this guy. It's like The Sopranos. The luck of the Irish or the luck of the Jewish, but I'd prefer to call it again the hand of God. The finger of the luck of my dad, I suppose. I don't know anybody. I mean, he was a cat with 20 lives. For my 9 lives, just unbelievable.
Well, that's incredible. Yeah. Was there one more you were going to share briefly?
Oh no, yeah. In between, just all the miracles, the hiding places, the friends, people you thought were going to be your friends turned out to be your enemies. People you thought would be your enemies turned out to be your friends. The way the Orthodox prisoners in the labor camp treated the non-Orthodox prisoners in the labor camp, which I think is appalling. I'm seeing a lot of that now with all this anti-Semitism on the rise, and how the Jewish people and the Judeo-Christian people aren't always so cohesive like we were, say, after 9/11, and certainly during World War II. Just haven't seen that, and it's really sad. You're from Canada and Toronto. I have cousins that live in Toronto. They're Orthodox. One's a dentist. The other one runs a factory and a storage warehouse. They're both good people, Orthodox. They have families. They're nice guys. Their father and mother passed away. He was an architect. which probably saved his life during World War II. He was helpful. He was a helpful young man as an architect. So, but they're in Toronto, and I'm worried for their safety too. We've got all these people carousing the Bathurst district, and they used to live in the Bathurst district, and I was appalled to see that the other day. That my poor cousins. I mean, I wrote about this. The history in the book is 60, 80, 100 years ago, and people will say, "Well, what does it have to do with today?" Or what? Why does this resonate with today? It sure does. I mean, how does it not? And I've never imagined when I started this project 6 years ago that this would all be going on now. I mean, I always knew anti-Semitism was in the background, as is racism, and there was the Islamophobia after 9/11, and then the Asian hate after the COVID epidemic, and that's just ignorance. That's just people that aren't reading up and just. I don't know. We can talk. That's another hour discussion, but it's relevant. I think what happened in my dad's life, and the way the communists didn't treat the Jewish people any better than the Nazis, short of corralling them in town centers and hauling them off to kill them. But the rights weren't there. They didn't have the right to couldn't have a Jewish wedding. Just very very restricted. And also, well, they were treated. The forced labor guys were treated as prisoners of war when the Russians finally got established. After the war, and so my dad ended up being in another forced labor camp. It wasn't as harrowing, but it was dangerous. He was a food prep guy, and he had a taste test for the soldiers and the officers. And that was under Stalin, who was paranoid. They had the doctors plot to kill Stalin, and so Stalin, thanks to I'm ashamed to say a radiologist, said that he was paranoid that the doctor, this person, got that into his head that some of these doctors out to get you. So they watched all the people that were preparing the food and any doctors and the Jewish doctors, etc. Every motion. Fortunately, Stalin died soon after that, and my dad was set free from that harrowing experience as well. And then a lot of the Jews were assigned to farms and factories after World War II. That was another thing. They didn't know what to do with them. They were uneducated. They were starved. They were misplaced. They had no homes like my dad, and it's really sad. And we found some of the documents that. My mother's uncle was a communist, and he did that for his own survival. I don't think he liked being a communist, but he just joined the party because he thought that was the way for survival, and it would keep his family protected in a funny way. And even then, there was controversy with that, and it's clearly written in the book. So, he was part of the economic development of Hungary, which really suffered a severe recession before and after the war. The Great Depression was in the 30s. And there was documents saying, well, what are we going to do with our Jews? Can you imagine if we said, what are we going to do with our Indian Americans here or our African Americans, or what are we going to do with them? And they assigned them to farms and factories. So, and of course, POW camps for the people that were in the paramilitary, the forced labor camps.
Mm-hmm. Now, Robert, I want to ask a question about the term that you used. You mentioned 4 escapes, 4 miracles, really, I think is what you said. And you've used that term miracle a few times. To what do you attribute those miracles? What does that mean personally for you?
I just think that God was looking after him his whole life. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't even know how I could survive what he went through. Never mind. He never had PTSD. I could never imagine doing and going through what he went through. And having such a risk tolerance that survival was everything, and just doing once after the other. But the miracles, those 4 escapes were miraculous, and the one he missed was miraculous too. And then of course the lady notifying him about what happened to his parents, and hiding in places where soldiers were right around the doorstep, including like a casino, temporary, and then finding a place, sort of a halfway house of wealthier Jewish former forced labor camp escapees who established their own little fraternity. And he and Frank got to live there for a little while. And they were sort of houseboys. And that was a miracle. So they slept in real beds for a while, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. All they had to do was prepare the food, serve the food, distribute the food to the nursing homes, on and on. And that actually helped them because they were so kind to the people in the nursing homes, because food was so scarce at the time, that they remembered my dad, and they let him hide in a nursing home for a while as well. So a nunnery, sisterhood of nuns hid him under the bed. I mean, crazy. A demented lady who thought my dad was her husband, which is a funny story. So, I mean, that's not a miracle, but the way he got away at the casino, and just right place at the right time. The way he got into medical school, because he met the right lady at the right time. I mean, it's too many to count. But it's inspiring, and it had to really make my dad motivated too. I mean, the determination. Dad was not Orthodox, but he did attribute a lot of his luck. He would say thank God, and he would appreciate the Lord, and so and appreciate that, and that's the only way I can look at it too. Is he certainly had him on his side during his toughest times in life.
Right. Well, I think it's amazing to think, people have said, and I think I believe this, that when God is involved in your story, a lot of coincidences happen. People will say those things, oh, they were just coincidences. Well, there was a lot of them in a row, and it seems like something more was being orchestrated than just, luck. And I think that maybe that's a great way to look at it. Well, we don't want to give the whole book away today, but I do want to ask you, you sort of touched on this a moment ago, but why do you feel your book is so relevant today in 2024?
Well, it's just all this hatred now. I mean, I'm against any type of hatred. I have Jewish friends, I have Christian friends, I've got Asian, Muslim friends. It's ridiculous. My best friend, one of my best friends from college, he's Muslim. He's a squash pro. Lives in Arizona, and I went to see him. And I got a book presentation at a Greek Orthodox church there from one of my best friends from ninth grade. So one of my best friends from freshman in high school, meets one of my best friends freshman from college, and we're in a Greek Orthodox church, a Jewish guy and a Muslim guy, and my assistant's Muslim, and we're presenting to an all Christian with kids, which is wonderful, and it was well received. And I think most people have a normal attitude about hatred. I mean, 99% of people, I think, are on our side, have certain values, family, maybe religion, food, entertainment, career, the need for peace, the need for comfort. But there's that 1%, or whatever it is, that, I always say there's always one guy that ruins it for everybody. Pol Pot, whoever leads Hamas, Adolf Hitler, Fidel Castro, Osama bin Laden. It's always one guy who ruins it for everybody. So same thing happening again. A handful of people stirring up the crowds in New York and in Toronto and wherever else. And it's the same kind of thing with all that, all the propaganda that the Nazis had in the uprising of Hitler in the 30s and 40s. And thank God we're not that extreme, because there's enough normalcy here. And I really don't feel directly threatened yet, but I live in a 55 and older community, and we've had talks about hatred, and we've had a swastika or two defacing somebody's door, and so it's real. And Southern Florida has a pretty big Jewish population for sure, and to see that here, it's appalling. There's a lot of money down here, but there's also a lot of poverty down here too, as I imagine Toronto and New York City and LA, the same kind of thing. So poverty somehow maybe enters into it. This need for land, and the thing with the need for land with Gaza and Hamas, and what does that have to do with you or me? What does that have to do with my dad? That part of it is, I'm not. My dad was a doctor. I'm a doctor. His dad was a dentist. Our families contributed to society, and we've given tzedakah, a charity, over the years. And so, how am I a threat? How are we a threat to what's going on in society? And it's just really not. It's not cool. It's not acceptable. I think it's disgusting. And so I guess my charge now is just to fight that, because it does parallel with that. And it really goes back to the Old Testament. It goes back to Exodus, if not sooner. The Philistines, Samson and the Philistines, and the Exodus. And you're a man of the cloth, so you probably know the Bible a lot better than me. But that's that hatred. And then, of course, we had the harrowing times with the Muslims and the Christians, and the Spanish Inquisition, and the hate just goes on and on. And I'm not an Islamophobe. I've got, like I said, I've got a lot of Islamic friends. I have a lot of friends that are Muslim, and I tend to keep them until I'm gone. And Asian friends and African American friends, the tons. And that's something about my parents too that I want to teach people, is they didn't shun other people from other religions or other ethnicities. They reached out. They wanted to learn about. For example, they met somebody in Hong Kong who was a Chinese refugee, and they wanted to compare notes on the communist society in China versus Hungary under the Russian rule. So that kind of thing. My parents had friends from India and Africa and Japan, all over, and they really like to reach out and learn about people too. So that's one of the lessons in the book. That's one of my lessons too, is that people are people. Don't judge them for their religion. Don't judge them for their skin color. It's not right. There's good people and there's bad people. Most people are good, as we know, and just judge a person by a person. As we get older, we can judge people pretty quickly by their initial period. But in the end, you're maybe only going to have 20 friends or 100 friends. But I like to have thousands of friends, not because I need to have a
Mm.
party for them and have them here on my doorstep every day, but because I want them to understand what happened to my parents and to help us not have it be repeated in what's going on today. So it really is quite relevant. I mean, and fortunately, our government and our police still protect us. Whereas in my dad's day, there was no TikTok, there were no lawyers, there were no cell phones. The only witness was the next victim. For example, on the Danube, when they shot all the people at the end of the war on the Danube, killed all of them, drowned them. That was your witness, was the next victim. So and now, fortunately, and of course, the Arrow Cross and other police organizations from Hungary were your worst enemies. They hated the Jews worse than the Nazis. So when your government and your own police and military are against you, then you're in trouble because you only hope for God's mercy. But I can't fight a submachine gun. I can't fight a hand grenade, and I
Right.
don't plan to. I'm trying to do it with peace and quiet and education. Brings me another point: education. I want to educate the children. You got to educate the youngsters. Well, we have to educate the adults too, because hatred is learned at home, just like a lot of things. Stuff that people learn how to be tolerant, or how to hate, or how to neglect from home, and so that's part of my charge too, is to get people educated. And so we're going to do as many of these presentations and podcasts, and until until I can't move or I can't talk
Yeah.
or I burn myself right out of it. But the message is clear, and this is what we do.
Well, that's great, and I commend you for that. I want to ask one last question as we start to sort of wrap this up here. But there is a certain mob mentality that was prevalent back in the 1930s, 1940s, and now we're seeing this again in our world today. Rise in anti-Semitism on campuses and in the media, social media in particular. We see this kind of mob mentality taking over. Does any of what we're seeing today, does it remind you of any of the sort of significant moments in your book, in your dad's story?
Well, yeah, because when they were walking the streets prior to the war, they were afraid to get mugged or get picked on, they had to restrict their time out to go to the stores, clearly because they were worried about that rise in hatred. So even before the war, and after the war, forget it. I mean, there were ransacked businesses and beaten store owners, and of course everybody's house was replaced. We're not at that point yet. But mob mentality to me is uneducated. I mean, a mob mentality at Columbia, at Harvard, at Tufts, my alma mater, at Michigan, my other, it's appalling. Think for yourself. Don't think
Yeah.
for yourself. And why does it have to be violent? Call your representative, call the president, talk to the president, call the mayor of the city. They let it go on too long, I think, and that was a shame too. I think the presidents of these universities just they had a poor grasp of what was going on. I'm still worried about it in Canada. I hear these things about Justin Trudeau. I'm not political, and I'm not going to get into it, but I've heard a lot of criticisms, and here in the States too, about how the leadership is sort of passive aggressive, if you will, about fighting it, and hopefully it smolders down. I'm thinking it will. Hopefully, when the war ends, they get the hostage crisis worked out. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. I mean, 911 was American targets, and a lot of these protesters, a lot of them weren't even born yet. They weren't even kids yet, and a lot of them are denying 911 like they're denying the Holocaust. But I got to
Yeah.
remind you that those were American victims. Those were Jews, Muslims, Christians, Asians. That was an attack against America. That was our last cohesiveness with the Afghanistan war, which even then we grew real tired of. And when they got out of there, that was sort of a disaster too. And then COVID hit and everything else. But yes, there are a lot of parallels. But hopefully it smolders down. Hopefully peace and quiet is it's the summer now, which is good. So schools are out for the most part, which is good. Let people simmer down. But if you're going to be go after people because of something that's unrelated to an individual, the guy in L.A. that got killed, a 65-year-old man that got murdered soon after October 7th, the president of a synagogue in Detroit got murdered, got stabbed to death soon after October 7th. Those aren't. What do they have to do with Gaza? What do they have to do with Hamas and Israel? And Israel has such a small, as you know, population compared to the Arab world, and such a small area of land, about the size of New Jersey, I don't know. There's no reason you can't work out something with the land, but obviously, Bibi, now he's saying that it's almost impossible to have that two-state system. I'm not going to get into that either. He has the right to defend the Israeli people, just like we have the right to be defended by our own government and police and military. So, and people have been killed and tortured and raped, and people are still hostages, and they're missing out on dental care, somebody pointed out the other day, and education, and they must be smoldering now because it's Israel and it's the middle of the summer. So these poor people must be, dying in I wrote a little poem about today's podcast because it rhymed with Laura, I guess, sort of sauna, but I could use the word drama too. But it's awful. I mean, I can't stomach it. I can't fathom it, and that's what I'm doing, is fighting it. My charity is a part of the education for me. Besides it being a legacy for my parents, is 10% of my author proceeds are being donated to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. That's in perpetuity, ongoing, even after I'm gone. Hopefully someday that'll be a lot of money, but that's part of my and we keep doing the message. I really appreciate you inviting me and talking about it.
Well, it's been our pleasure to have you on, and thank you for your passion on this issue. I look forward to getting my hands on a copy of the book. I confess, I haven't read it yet, but I'm even more intrigued now. And I think that people listening and people watching are going to want to know how they can get in touch with you, how they can learn more, where they can find your book. Please tell us how people can do that.
Okay, so it's called, the book is Not a Real Enemy, The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. Wonderful book cover. The guy who did it, we never met him. It was all done online from Croatia. Very reasonable price, really great job. He subtly blends in the colors of the Hungarian flag into the book cover. Got great testimonials. If you Google Robert J. Wolf, MD, if you Google Not a Real Enemy, you'll find the book, you'll find me. My website is robertjwolfmd.com. A little bit more about Nazi Hungary, a little bit more about the Hungarian Revolution, and then a lot of videos. I've done a lot. This is my 46th podcast. Thank you very much, and counting. So wow. We don't have that many on the website, but we have quite a few. I had a PR person help me out not that long ago. So in 17 TV interviews, 2 or 3 radio interviews, and then the podcast too. So a lot of content on the website, robertjwolfmd.com. You can buy the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can just go to Barnes & Noble store or order online. If go to a local Barnes & Noble, it'd be great, and just ask them about the book. That brings up attention. Walmart online, Tufts University, my alma mater. Proud to say Saul Gittleman, Professor Emeritus, wrote a really nice review for me and got the book into the library, but it's also on sale at the Tufts bookstore. And then the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And we've done presentations at both. It's been an honor to say that I've been invited to go back a second time to the one in D.C., so I'm really humbled and honored, and hopefully that'll happen in the fall. Such a nice feeling, and that was a feeling of normalcy, because a lot of kids, a lot of families coming in and asking about genocide and asking about the book and the stories, and really showing an interest and the support of their parents. And we sold a ton of books, signed a ton of books, and it was just a wonderful experience. And I would do that every day if I could, if it were only that easy to attract that many people in that short a time period and tell them about what the dark world is about. It would go a long way.
Excellent. Well, Robert, thank you so much again for being with us. If you're watching and listening, the book is Not a Real Enemy, The Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. And you can go to that link that is on your screen and find where you can get more information about that. Robert, we appreciate you sharing with us today, and you have an amazing day. Thanks for being with us.
You too. Thanks. I appreciate the time and the help, and God bless you, and much appreciated.
Thanks for watching. You can listen to this entire podcast on your favorite audio podcast platform. Find the link below. And while you're at it, don't forget to click subscribe and follow us on Facebook so you can stay connected to First Century Foundations.